On August 14, 1945, Japan surrendered, marking the end of World War II. This announced a new beginning of age for territory in Asia, as Japan's imperialistic reign had ended. Countries such as the United States wanted to know what this meant for the structure of Asia in terms of military and economic power. Thus, the 38th parallel was drafted and later officialized at the Potsdam Conference. The 30th parallel is an imaginary boundary that divided the Korean peninsula roughly in half. When the Republic of Korea, also known as South Korea, was declared, the new state adopted Seoul to be its capital. Less than a month later, the Democratic People's Party for North Korea was created, making the city Pyongyang its capital. Now that the agreement of dividing Korea was officialized, foreign influences from World War II began to lessen their hold on the countries. But North and South Korea, as enemies of one another, knew that the border in which divided them would not last. Kim Il-sung, the leader of the North Korean Communist Party, wanted to liberate or control South Korea entirely. During his early planning, he gained support from Soviet leader Joseph Stalin and Chinese leader Mao Zedong. Meanwhile, Syngman Rhee is elected chairman of the Korean Assembly and later becomes president of South Korea. The U.S. was supportive of the South and their presidential choices. But on June 25, 1950, North Korea finally invaded South Korea. Over 100,000 North Korean soldiers flooded through the 38th parallel, easily pushing back on the unprepared South Korean army. 3 days later, on June 28th, the South Korean capital, Seoul, was captured. U.S. Marines then joined the battle, leading the UN Army on the Korean peninsula to side with South Korea. Facing many casualties, they were pushed back on the perimeter of Pusan. North Korea was now at its highest vantage point as they were continuing to push UN and South Korean forces against the Pusan border. But it would not last forever, as on September 26, 1950, UN forces landed in the city Incheon and successfully took back Seoul. Even more, on October 19, 1950, UN forces were able to capture the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. Pushing their luck, UN and South Korean forces continue onward in North Korean territory. They soon reached the Yalu River, where they were met and attacked by Chinese communist soldiers. The Chinese army issued a warning to the UN forces to back off. The US and South Korean armies refused, and despite the Chinese army being smaller, they were able to fight back and cause a hasty retreat for the UN forces. And on January 4, 1951, Chinese and North Korean forces took back control over Seoul. But due to continuous fighting, US and South Korean forces gained control over Seoul again. This was the fourth time in history the city Seoul was transferred to another power. Now on April 22, 1951, two major battles in the Korean War took place at the same time. The first battle was the Battle of Kapyong, also known as the Battle in Jiaping. It was a battle in which was primarily fought between the UN forces. Major participants were the United States, Canada, Australia, and Italy, who fought against the Chinese Communist forces. Italy helped in providing military hospitals and field ambulances during the battle. Meanwhile, the battle at the Imjin River took place in China itself. Korean and British soldiers crossed over the Imjin River, where they were violently fighting against the Chinese and USSR forces, who and which also deployed many troops to fight in Korea. For both battles, it was a victory for the UN and South Korea, as Chinese forces surrendered due to losing over 70,000 men in the battles. Seoul was now securely under South Korea's rule, but this victory was short-lived, as North Korean forces were still making advances to capture more territory. On July 10, 1951, the United States and Communists go to Kaesong to discuss plans for negotiation. They were unable to come to an agreement, and the meetup had only created more bitter feelings between sides. As a final attack, the United States began to bomb the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. This reign of nuclear weapons went on for 2 months straight. Finally, after being bombarded by these nuclear weapons, North Korea and the United States decided to come together to finally end all the bloodshed during the Korean War. And on July 27, 1953, all countries involved in the war signed an armistice agreeing to end foreign military battles. A new North and South Korean border was drawn, and with it came a buffer zone that made the 38th parallel wider. But even if foreign forces retracted, the aggression between North and South Korea remain even to this day. Even if both countries are currently trying to seek a way to obtain an era of peace, the tension from past wars and the difference in culture will always remain. For this last part, I was able to pull together my resources to recreate a more accurate representation of a battle during the Korean War. Viewer discretion is advised.
우리 땅을 돌려주세요.
갓나새끼 더 내놔라우. 마.
Leave South Korea alone.
에이씨, 기다리라우. 내 동물을 데리고 갔어.
Ready, go!